The door to my apartment clicked shut behind them, but the air still felt thick, poisoned by their presence. 2 hours earlier, I had crossed the stage at the University of Colorado Law School, diploma in hand, the applause still echoing in my ears.
Now,
At 25, standing in the living room of the $950,000 corner condo my grandmother had left me, I faced my mother, stepfather, and half-brother. They hadn't come to celebrate. They had come to take my home. Victoria, my mother, smiled that practiced, honey-sweet smile that always preceded a demand. Madison, sweetheart, we need to talk about the apartment situation. Not congratulations. Not pride in my achievements. Just the apartment. Robert, my stepfather, stood beside her in his tailored suit, gripping a thick manila folder like a weapon. My half-brother Brandon leaned against the wall, 22 and restless, eyes gleaming with barely contained excitement. I set my graduation cap on the marble kitchen island,
the cool stone grounding me.
The condo was everything to me, a 2-bedroom sanctuary on the 15th floor with sweeping views of the Rocky Mountains. The kind of place my grandmother Margaret had scrimped and saved her entire life to own. There's nothing to discuss, I said evenly, my voice steady despite the storm rising inside. Robert opened the folder. Actually, there are irregularities in the estate transfer. Your mother, as Margaret's only child, should have inherited first. We have documentation proving a mistake in probate. Victoria slid a paper across the counter. I didn't touch it. I already knew it was fabricated. Weeks ago, I had spoken with a paralegal who handled grandmother's estate. Someone pretending to be me had been fishing for copies of the will. Brandon couldn't hold back. You have 1 week to move out. Mom's got a cash buyer lined up, closing in 30 days. They had driven all the way from Chicago on my graduation day for this. The realization settled like ice in my stomach. Where was the pride? Where was the love? I thought of the 12-year-old me, abandoned for months while Victoria chased her latest romance. The college student working double shifts because my tuition money had been diverted to Brandon's private school. I need time to review these, I said, gesturing to the papers. Robert smirked. You've only just graduated. You're not even barred yet. Don't make this difficult. They thought I was still the quiet girl who never fought back. They thought the responsible one would simply hand over the keys. Friday morning, 9 o'clock, I told them, meeting each pair of eyes. Come back then. Bring your lawyer. We'll settle it properly. Victoria's smile returned, triumphant. That's my smart girl. This money will help the whole family. After they left, I stood at the window, watching the mountains catch the late afternoon light. The silence wrapped around me like a hug from grandmother. They believed they had me cornered. They had no idea I had spent months preparing. I picked up my phone and texted Edward Harrison, the real estate attorney who had become my quiet ally. The documents were filed. The irrevocable trust was in place. The Evelyn No. Margaret Grant Memorial Trust now held the condo, with me as sole trustee and beneficiary. They were fighting for something they no longer legally owned. The first warning signs had appeared months earlier, during a cold February weekend home from school. I walked into the condo and felt it immediately, subtle shifts in the mail stack. The spare key turned the wrong way. Building security footage confirmed Victoria and Robert had visited using an old emergency contact I had never revoked. That night, I changed the locks and removed her name from everything. Then came Brandon's careless Instagram post from a downtown Denver bar, scouting the new neighborhood. Big things coming. Family business. Comments revealed he expected to move in soon. A friend from my undergraduate days texted, Victoria had inquired about liens and mortgages on the property address at his bank. I wasn't paranoid anymore. I was prepared. I hired a private investigator quietly. The report was devastating. Victoria carried nearly $50,000 in credit card debt. Robert's contracting business faced bankruptcy and liens. Brandon had been expelled from college, not suspended, as they claimed, for running an illegal gambling operation and owing $30,000 to dangerous creditors in Chicago. They weren't merely greedy. They were cornered animals. The investigator uncovered meetings with an attorney named David Klein, forging a case, a revised will claiming grandmother lacked mental capacity, emails suggesting I had coerced her, even falsified medical records alleging dementia. They planned to strike right after graduation, when they thought I would be too emotional to fight. My law school roommate overheard Klein boasting at a conference about $1 million contingency case against an ungrateful daughter. 30% for him, nearly $300,000, split among the rest. In their minds, the condo was already sold, debts erased, new lives funded. I began documenting obsessively. Every suspicious text, every call. I copied the genuine will. Medical records proving grandmother's sharp mind until her final stroke, and loving emails between us filled with encouragement and dreams. April brought their timeline into focus. At a family wedding, a tipsy Brandon confided to a cousin that after my graduation, the family would relocate to Denver and sort out the property. The cousin told me everything. They pictured luxury living in grandmother's home, paid for by her sacrifice. I met Edward Harrison again, spreading out my evidence. They're building a sophisticated fraud, he admitted. If you hadn't acted early, this could have dragged on painfully. But the trust is irrevocable. The transfer is recorded. Their forgeries will only expose their crime. We added protections, a poison pill clause forfeiting future claims if challenged, a no-contest provision leaving Victoria exactly $1, symbolic of the emotional value she had provided. Security triggers, charitable fallback if anything suspicious happened to me. Edward called it bulletproof after 30 years in the field. The next day, I watched the deed transfer recorded at the county clerk's office. The clerk smiled knowingly. Protecting what's yours? Yes, I replied. Smart move. I created a paper trail of naive vulnerability, certified letters expressing hope for respectful family discussion, texts to Brandon that sounded compliant. Let them believe I was weakening. Meanwhile, I secured affidavits from witnesses, including the paralegal who recalled Victoria's aggressive demands for documents. The final week before graduation was tense. Victoria called, voice artificially warm, suggesting a family meeting to discuss the future. I matched her tone, hinting at accountability. She hung up quickly. On graduation morning, I stood before grandmother's antique mirror in cap and gown, touching her pearl necklace for courage. I remembered the child crying alone, the teenager watching Victoria lavish attention on Brandon, the young woman holding grandmother's hand as she passed, promising to honor her legacy. That girl had become a woman ready to defend what mattered. The ambush arrived exactly as calculated, 2 hours post-ceremony. I heard their voices in the hallway, Victoria's bright false cheer, Robert's heavy steps, Brandon's nervous laugh. I started my phone recording and slipped it into my pocket before opening the door. Victoria air-kissed my cheek, eyes appraising the space like an auctioneer. Robert carried cheap champagne. Brandon scrolled his phone, likely updating creditors. David Klein followed dramatically, briefcase in hand, suit straining against ego. We're so proud, Victoria said, settling on grandmother's couch. Then the pivot, but we must address irregularities in the estate. Klein produced forged documents, fake medical statements from a discredited doctor, fabricated emails showing coercion. A revised will leaving the condo to Victoria and Brandon. Victoria's tears appeared on cue. She wanted me to have it. You kept me from her final days. The gaslighting stung. But I had prepared. Grandmother had been in hospice, Victoria missed calls while vacationing. Robert demanded I vacate in 7 days. They offered $10,000 from the sale. Family generosity. Brandon blurted about the cash buyer. I let the silence stretch, watching their anticipation build. Then I spoke. You've worked hard on this. Friday at 9. Bring everyone. We'll settle properly. They left confused, arguing in whispers. I deadbolt the door and called Edward. They took the bait. Everything recorded. The days between ambush and Friday were meticulous preparation. I consulted estate law professors who confirmed textbook fraud. The notary seal belonged to a woman deceased since 2019. One professor agreed to an expert affidavit. My investigator uncovered more. Robert under IRS investigation for tax evasion, owing over $100,000. Brandon's gambling ties to organized crime. Victoria's credit ruined. Desperation made them dangerous. I swept the condo for surveillance devices, 2 bugs found in lamps and detectors. Before disabling them, I staged a tearful call pretending to consider surrender. Feeding their hopes. Edward arrived Thursday with his team, a court reporter, and retired Judge Harold Brennan as neutral witness. We rehearsed every detail. Building security was alerted. A detective stood by. That night, insomnia drove me through the rooms, touching grandmother's reading chair,
Books.
kitchen table where she taught that money served people, but broken trust could never be fully mended. At 3 a.m., Brandon texted a veiled threat. Just give us the apartment. You don't want to see what happens. More evidence. Friday dawned gray and drizzly, fitting for reckoning. I dressed in a sharp suit, grandmother's pearls and ring for strength. By 8:30, my team assembled, documents arrayed like armor. Judge Brennan in her favorite chair. Roommate Sarah ready to record. Mrs. Chen, the retired judge next door and grandmother's friend, listening through a cracked door with hallway cameras rolling. Security texted, family arriving with extra people. Investigator confirmed Klein. Another lawyer. And hired muscle. I texted back. Let them come. At 9 sharp. The knock sounded, entitled, Heavy. I glanced at Judge Brennan. At grandmother's photo. This is for you, I whispered. Then opened the door. Victoria wore her funeral suit. Robert and Brandon flanked her. Klein and reinforcements followed. They halted at the sight of my team. What is this? Victoria demanded. Witnesses, I replied calmly. You brought yours. I brought mine. Mr. Klein, you were saying about irregularities. Klein began presenting forgeries. Judge Brennan interrupted, introducing himself and recalling a past sanction against Klein for falsified evidence. The muscle shifted. One of Edward's associates, a former Marine, mirrored him. I countered with genuine medical records, proving normal cognition. Explain how a doctor who lost his license 3 years earlier examined grandmother? Edward took over. The property sits in the Margaret Grant Memorial Trust, irrevocable. Recorded 2 weeks ago. You cannot claim what no longer belongs to an individual estate. Brandon exploded. That's our money. I turned to him. Interesting wording. How much do you owe the Chicago crew? 30,000. 2 weeks ago? Is that why the threats at 3 a.m.? Judge Brennan read the text aloud. Klein fumbled. I revealed the dead notary's seal and affidavits from supposed witnesses denying involvement. Sarah confirmed continuous recording. The room erupted. Victoria lunged for the phone. Robert grabbed my arm. Brandon shouted obscenities.
The muscle advanced.
Stop, Judge Brennan commanded. Sit down, or I call police now. They sat, shaken. I noted the assault for the court reporter. You came with forgeries, extortion threats, hired intimidation. All documented. Edward called the detective. As officers arrived, Klein was arrested for fraud and forgery. Robert, Victoria, and the muscle faced questioning. Brandon wept, begging mercy. For a moment, I felt the weight of shared blood, but not enough to yield. There's legitimate help, bankruptcy, protection programs, but I won't reward theft. Mark threatened lawsuits. Edward countered. Assets frozen. Credit destroyed. Disbarment looming. Who would fund it? Victoria turned at the door. Mascara streaked. I'm your mother. Doesn't that mean anything? I met her gaze. It means despite everything. I'm not pressing assault charges today. But approach me or this home again. Mercy ends. They were escorted out.
The door closed.
Silence returned, but different, peaceful. Earned. Judge Brennan shook my hand. Your grandmother would be proud. You protected her legacy. Sarah hugged me fiercely. Mrs. Chin emerged. Margaret always knew Victoria was trouble. You stood your ground. Edward updated. Klein held on high bail. Career finished. Victoria and Robert released pending charges. Brandon actually entered gambling rehab and cooperated with authorities. Alone. I sat in grandmother's chair with her favorite wine, watching sunset paint the mountains gold. The condo felt like a fortress defended. Messages arrived. District attorney confirming charges. Detective noting ongoing investigations. Brandon texted an apology and rehab update, genuine or calculated. Time would reveal. A week later, a letter from Victoria arrived. No return address. Familiar handwriting. She admitted poor mothering, resentment toward grandmother's stability, self-love over family. She claimed buried love, but offered no excuses. I read it twice. Filed it away. No reply. Some wounds stay open as reminders. 3 months passed. I passed the bar on first attempt. Edward offered a position in estate law and fraud prevention. My first client, an elderly woman shielding assets from greedy kin. I knew precisely how to guide her. Brandon sent occasional updates, from rehab to warehouse job. He tried. Robert fled to Alaska construction work, evading IRS and debts. Victoria moved in with her sister in Florida, sending a signed Christmas card. I didn't respond. The condo became sanctuary and office. I worked at grandmother's desk, lived by her principles, honored her in every case. The Margaret Grant Memorial Trust expanded. I established a scholarship for students raised by grandparents, paying forward the stability she gave me. One evening a year later, I visited her grave with yellow roses, friendship and devotion. I did it. Grandmother. Protected our home. Stood firm. Wind stirred the trees. For a moment, her lavender scent seemed to linger. I reflected on the girl forgotten on birthdays, watching divided attention, holding a dying hand with promises. That girl learned family transcends DNA. It's who shows up,
Who stays?
who loves without condition. The condo wasn't merely inheritance. It proved real love outweighs blood. Money. Betrayal. Walking back. I felt lighter. The fight hadn't been against family, but for the right to define family on my terms. With grandmother's love as armor and truth as weapon, I had won what mattered. The apartment stood waiting not just walls, but memories of genuine care, lessons in resilience, and certainty I belonged exactly where roots had grown deep. The questions lingered. What price does greed exact on blood ties? How do we measure a mother's love against actions that wound? In protecting what was given with love, had I become the stronger one, or simply the one unwilling to repeat the cycle of abandonment? The mountains kept their silent watch, offering no easy answers. Only the enduring truth that some inheritances are worth every battle.